Okay, I'm here with Barb, Mr. Mayor, here with the treasurer.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Sorry for the delay. We just had an audio problem in the municipal office, but I think we're settled. And I see that all of our councilors are here. I think I saw Councillor Lamb and I saw Councillor Woods. I see, at least I see a telephone. So I guess, Brian, you're audio only, I'm assuming.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's right.
Well, thank you. Glad you could make it. And we also have our CAO clerk, Michelle Hendry, our fire chief, Bob Whitman, who's also on audio only, I think. Our interim treasurer, Barb Cribbett, who is with Michelle in the office.
I didn't realize she's got a.
And Dave Creaser, who is, I guess, online from the Works Garage. Anyway, we're all here, so without further ado, I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask our clerk if she could play the national anthem.
You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry about that. I did click it, but nothing happened. The municipality of Whitestone recognizes all of Canada resides on traditional, unceded, and/or treaty lands of the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. We recognize our municipality on the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory is home to many past, present, and future Indigenous families. This acknowledgement of the land is a declaration of our commitment and collective responsibility to reconcile the past and to honor and value the culture, history, and relationships we have with one another. Okay, thank you. You have an agenda that has been circulated. Could I ask for a motion, a mover and seconder, please, to adopt this agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Disclosure of pecuniary interest goes before that.
Yes, you're correct. Thank you, Councillor Lamb. I will ask, is there any pecuniary interest to disclose? Okay, thank you. There appears to be none being declared. So now, the approval of the agenda has been moved by Councillor Gorham Matthews. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. Any discussion about the agenda? Is anyone opposed to this being the agenda? All right, thank you. That's carried. Now, can we move into committee of the whole, please? Mover and seconder.
I'll move
I'll
it.
move,
Counselor
Counselor
Lamb.
Wood.
Okay, I heard Counselor Lamb move and Counselor Wood second. And it is 2:12 PM. Any opposition to this motion? Hearing none, that's carried. And once again, the purpose of moving into committee of the whole is so that we can consider the latest report and this latest version of the budget without any motions on the floor. So what I'll do is to start is to ask our treasurer if she would like to introduce the report for today and highlight the things that have changed since our last meeting a month ago when we reviewed the budget. So Barb, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first page of the report does identify a number of the changes that have been made since the February 22nd meeting. The Swords Road boat launch for $95,000 has been removed from the capital budget. It's under review and will be revisited in 2023. The maintenance gravel account has been increased from $150,000 to $180,000. There was a review that took place with both the Public Works Manager and the Fire Chief to go through a number of their budget line items, and there were some reductions made as a result of that, some savings. We've also took a look at the insurance and the group benefits in particular, and we've adjusted those up a little bit in anticipation of increased premiums. The road grant budget was increased by $3,900 to allow for an increase of 3.5% to the X and Y factor used in the road grant calculation, as well as a slight increase just for participation. You may note that the budget last year and the actual were very close, so we had very high participation last year. We also increased the Goose Lake dock from $5,000 to $15,000. Both the gooseneck result of discussion at the council meeting on the February 22nd. So going through everything, the overall shortfall right now has been reduced down to about $78,000. At this point, we have the option of funding this through the 2021 surplus. I can't give you a definite number at this point, although it looks like there will be a surplus. Or we draw from reserves and move whatever surpluses we do get into the reserves after the fact, or we eliminate unfunded projects at this point. Those are the major changes. There were a number of smaller changes as we went through the review process for the budget.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other comments, Madam CAO, that you want to make before we start?
No, I think that our treasurer covered everything. There's further information on revenues and expenses, and what we didn't do is we didn't detail all of the refinements that were made between the Public Works Manager and the Fire Chief and myself, but they weren't significant. They were it's just, you know, you get new information and you refine some of the budget. Some went up and a lot of them went down just as we had new information. So it brought the shortfall down to the 78,000 that the treasurer noted. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm not sure that there's any merit in us, you know, going through line by line, going through particularly the operating budget. As the clerk has commented, there are some minor changes that have been made there. You've heard the highlights of what they are, so I wonder if at this point we can just open the floor up to discussion about particular items that are are there that you want to talk about. Hopefully there are some. I think there'll be a few. So if you why don't you just pick something and
I'll
Well, go
pick
ahead.
something.
Councillor Lamb, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions, but I won't dominate the floor with all of them. But I wonder, and I think it would be valuable for perhaps for David to review the pit on Farley's Road. Unless I missed it, this is sort of new. The idea of changing it from a B to an A. And 100, for instance, is the 120,000 in this year's budget or not in this year's budget? And what's involved in all this? Is this equipment? Is it, do we have to grind to get our own gravel? I'm sort of a neophyte when it comes to all this. So can you take me and perhaps council and the rest who don't know through this whole pit situation on Farley's? How much we take out of there now, that sort of thing. Okay.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, David, please.
Yes, thank you,
Good
Mr.
question.
Mayor. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. So from the pit that we own, it's 88 acres. It's all licensed. That's where the ball diamond's located currently, off Dobson Roads and I guess off Farley's and Dobson Road. It does, the lower side, it does drain into Jenkins Creek there. From what I've found there is sand, predominantly sand, with some clay and a lot of bedrock. There's a couple different ridges of bedrock located in there. When licensing came about, I think in the 90s, the municipality prior to the municipality forming, the pit was most likely grandfathered in with the B license, meaning that we were allowed to maintain our status as an extraction resource. We were limited to 20,000 tons leaving the gates annually, and we were allowed to basically extract what was there above the water table to a limit of which has been established, of general limit of where we believe the water is. Now, there was an option back then that we could upgrade that to a quarry license, which means that you would be able to blast and crush rock. That was not done at the time. So the current situation we're in, our options are we can haul the sand out we have, which we do as best we can. We don't haul a large amount, but we use it for cover, we use it for fill, we use it for building up areas where we can, where it's practical to do so. So it doesn't serve a great purpose, the sand, right now, but it does offer fill. We do not have any gravel that's easily crushed. There's a little bit of gravel there, but it takes a great deal of effort to get to it. There's small seams of gravel, like I've seen them about a foot thick. So the potential for the pit lies in the stone or the rock. We would have to get a quarry license to blast and crush. If we were due to do so, we would need a license, a quarry license. And if we're going to get a quarry license, we might as well get an A license, which allows us to exceed the 20,000. They're the same requirements as far as the studies are concerned. The cost to do so, we had a consultant give us the cost last year, 2021. The estimate would be about $120,000 for acquiring a license. And that's pretty much to cover the cost for all these studies that are required. There's listed at the bottom of the report of some of the list of items required by the studies. So they would be, if I could name some of them off here, I'll have to look at them all. So there'd be water table, cultural heritage evaluation, traffic impact, archaeological assessment, blast design reports, noise impact assessment, and site plans. And then there would be also species at risk, different things like that would all be included in the study. So that's what would be required. From there, we would have to strip the overburden in the pit. We do have a location that's favorable with about a foot of overburden with a ridge on it. So it's a favorable location to one blast and organize our stormwater management into ponds so we could be environmentally friendly. So we would collect all the drainage water that would go into, that would come from the pit, and it would collect it into a series of ponds to let everything settle and filter the water when it did leave into Jenkins Creek. That being said, the blasting would occur likely once every 3 years or every 5 years, depending on how much we blast. So if we blasted, you would blast and crush once every 3 to 5 years. So, and it would last about 2 to 3 weeks. So you'd have noise for about that period of time. After that, we could haul out of the pit with our own trucks, and we can also tender to have them loaded and hauled out in the same manner we do now. It would just be a project that would occur every year. We do a load and haul tender, and it can be pulled out. The savings would be that we would have to haul less of a distance. So we would be located in our township rather than hauling from the next municipality over into our township. So the hauling itself would be a savings. And then also the savings would be, we haul a fair bit to our pit because we need to respond to emergencies and small projects. The pits that we have access to have limited hours of operations. So if we need gravel and they're not open, we can't respond to these emergencies. So we do need to have a certain stockpile on hand for us to be effective and serve the public. So there would be savings there as well. That we'd only be touching the gravel one time rather than having it hauled from the current location in where we buy the gravel pit, hauling it to our public works yard. That's touching it once, handling it once, and then picking it up again, putting it in our trucks, and then taking it out to a township wherever it's needed. So there's a great efficiency there, savings, potential for savings there as well. So that's basically what we're looking at is $120,000 would be in 2023's budget. There would be the opportunity of potentially using the grant that we have set up through the NORDS, the Northern Ontario Resource Development Support Fund, which we have for 21 through 2025, the 5 years. So one of those years could be used. I've talked to them and they said we could use that funding for one of the years, and that would potentially be we're looking at that for 2023 to occur. Now that was a mouthful. Do we have questions on some of those points?
So David, just to follow up, the 120 is not in this year's budget, and it will be up for discussion and resolution in the 2023 budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And at that time, I would think that it would do us, or what we should be doing is some sort of cost benefit analysis, right? We spend 120, and then what is the equipment after that? If indeed there is equipment to grind and blast and that kind of stuff. And then thirdly, what do we get out of that? What does our gravel budget go down by that we don't have to purchase outside? So I think a cost benefit analysis of some sort would help, I guess, the future council in making this decision. But if it's not in this year, I think I've got enough information based on what you say. The only final question I'd have is, in changing the pit classification, is there any sort of public process for that? I mean, do we have to go to the public and hold hearings or anything like that?
Yes. Yes, there is.
Oh, there is. Okay. Okay, that's the end of my questions on that. Then. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a question similar on the same topic? Sorry.
Yeah, sure, yeah, let's stick with this topic. for
Yeah, I'm
now.
not sure who it's to, but as our treasurer mentioned, we've increased the gravel amount, I believe it is, to 180 per year from 150. And we've gone up to 150 based on reports, as I recall. So I'm just wondering what prompted and what the justification is for going all the way to 180. I know we have major need, as per the study, as the study outlined, to give our roads a lot more attention. But could someone comment on going to the 180? It's a $30,000 increase, which was new.
David, do you want to handle that?
Yes, thank you very much. We do have the need in our road needs study does show we have a need. Our roads do show that we have a need. So I need gravel and we do absolutely need this amount of gravel. So last year we did put a good deal amount of gravel out there. Again, the costs look like they're creeping up this year, as they are with most things. So 20%. So to bring that up, we're trying to keep in line with some of the gravel that we put out last year. We're trying to keep those numbers in line. Last year we did have that response to East Town Line washout, which did take up some of our operating funds last year. But this year we are looking just to keep on closing the gap on our road needs study, which is the goal. We have that goal in mind as we operate. And going back to Councillor Lamb's comment on how much will this save us on gravel? Well, it'll make us more efficient and it will help us close the gap on the need to our service levels, to what we can accomplish. So we will be able to accomplish that ultimately with in a shorter amount of time. Like we'll be able to close that gap with less pressure on our taxation if we have a quarry. But in short, there is a need that's been identified by the road needs study and our asset management plan, and we are trying as best we can to stay on plan and on course with closing that gap.
Okay, thanks. I realize the importance of closing that gap. It's just adding 180 to each of the next 5 years, I believe it is. 1 to 3, 5 years. So it's another percent being added to the budget each year. So it is significant. So if it's totally necessary, I guess so be it. Because we know we want to close that gap for sure as time goes on. Thank you.
So I would just note in connection with the cost of gravel, there is a little bar chart on page 29 of your agenda package that shows a fairly drastic increase in the delivered cost. I mean, realize that's not to scale, of course, but it's the bars aren't, but it's a fairly significant increase in 2022. And this, I'm sure, is a reflection of the increased cost of fuel, which is a good chunk of which is likely here to stay. So the principal advantage to this, it seems to me, is in reducing trucking costs. But I do have a couple of questions related to the pit. The idea of actually having a quarry. And David, you mentioned that the blasting would take place perhaps over a couple of weeks and not even every year. But then presumably once you blast, you have to operate a crusher, and the crushing, I mean, the blast is the main disturbance from the blasting is noise. There is some dust, but the gravel crushers produce dust all the time. So I'm wondering if we think that the location of this as an operation of this as a quarry, well, first of all, I'm wondering who would actually operate it. I mean, are we going to buy a gravel crusher, or are we going to contract with somebody to bring it in and crush gravel? But my questions are do we think that this can be done without being objectionable to the public who are on Whitestone Lake in that general area?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We would essentially blast. We could plan it in such a way that we blast it every 5 years, which would be practical. Probably the most practical would be 5 years to 7 years. So to be efficient, we should do the cost goes down when you crush 100,000 tons. There's a magic number when you buy, like when you go to and you're buying something, the cost goes down at a point. The point is 100,000 tons. We would tender that out. So there would be a contractor that would come in and do the blasting for us. They would lay out a pattern. We tell them what our intentions are, if we're looking to crush, and then they would blast in accordance to that. Then we would tender for a crushing operation. So there would be essentially one blast or two blasts. If you got good rock, it's one blast. If you run into some trouble, and then you can get into a second blast. Okay. You can. Typically, it's one blast. So you have one blast, let's say, every 5 years. And then you would crush, and the crushing for that amount reasonably would be 3 weeks in operating hours, regular operating hour, business hours, Monday to Friday type thing. If there was a request to accelerate it and do it like around the clock, they could probably get it done in a week. Depends on who gets it and how big of a crusher they come in. But if you get a professional group like Stewart's or Gilbertson, there's a whole host of professionals that do this. They just have, that's all they do is they crush from area to area, and they do testing as well. There's mitigation for dust. The dust would be typically from trucking. When your trucks go in and out loading, that's where your dust is. We don't really have, it wouldn't really affect our neighbors much because they're not that close that way. The noise level would be from the crusher. So you'd have that 2 to 3 weeks every 5 years. We wouldn't have it more often simply because the cost is too great to crush. It just is. So we wouldn't operate like a Fowler's or someone else that might do it every year. We would do it every 5, maybe 7 years. And we would just pull from our inventory from that. We already have a pit. It has been a pit. It was, I believe, previously a pit. I'm not sure, operated by MTO. There's haul roads in place. So for us to go from one license to the other, it's not that much of a stretch. There is not that much concentration of housing in the area. It's not going to get any easier to get a license down the road. You would have to go through public consultation you would have to go through all the same thing every other licensing requirement is. Doesn't matter who you are, the license requirements apply to everybody. We would have to do everything. Now, because the pit's already been disturbed, we inherited it as a disturbed pit. Likely, it will come back positive because it's already been disturbed. So chances are, if there was anything there of significance, it's no longer there. Like any archaeological or anything else that wouldn't survive in a pit probably is gone because it's been disturbed. So it's favorable. It's a favorable situation to have that. It would be tendered out. There would be noise, but we wouldn't be making that much noise simply because if we'd haul probably for a week, maybe a week and a half. If we haul our trucks, that'd be once a year, and that'd be loading the trucks and getting them out the door in regular business hours. That would be the most nuisance probably from the pit. And we would put calcium down. You're required to put calcium down to mitigate dust. So that would be the case. The savings for crushing would be a little bit. We couldn't crush that much cheaper than, let's say, a Fowler's could. So there'd be some savings. The major savings would be hauling. The loading and hauling of trucks would be the major savings. The nuisance to the public, I don't think would be that great. We simply don't, we're not a commercial operation, so we wouldn't be that loud. And we wouldn't be that often either. We couldn't afford it.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question, and then again, as far as the pit is concerned, I take it that the study, the environmental study that is required, in whatever year we decide to do that, that's essentially going to probably take up the year. Am I right in saying that? Or
You are
'cause
correct.
I see that it's left over until next year, and there was a suggestion, oh, well, maybe we put something, I guess what we would put in the budget would be the cost of the environmental assessment, but if it's, by the time you get that done, it's not likely that you're going to also start extracting them. You get a license and start extracting in the same year. Is that a fair?
I would estimate there'd be 2 years in between to actually have product on the ground and use it. There'd probably be 2 years. Because from start to finish, it would be 2 years to have gravel on the ground, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Other comments about or questions about this pit or about gravel in general before we move on to something else?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. When it comes to the asset management plan and the roads needs study, I guess my question is, are they in sync? Excuse me. In the roads needs study, I remember hearing about, gee, I got a frog in my throat. I apologize here. In the roads needs study, I remember things like, 26% of our gravel roads were in poor shape, and something like 1.2 million in there to bring them up to some sort of standard. And then, of course, I remember in the asset management plan, we had to put something like 175,000 extra in the budget in order to meet the goals, et cetera, set out in the asset management plan. So I think I understand the plans. My question is, are they, is this budget, are those two plans in sync? Or is one greater than the other? Or is one, like, did the asset management plan take into account all the factors and recommendations in the roads needs study? So is it indeed really one study that we should be looking at, or two? Maybe, I don't know who can answer that. And hopefully I've phrased it properly. Thank you.
I'll perhaps jump in, Mr. Mayor. It's Michelle here. The answer to your question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, when the asset management plan was developed, the road needs study was a component of that. And one of the things that they realized very quickly was, notwithstanding there's a huge differential in what we're able to spend on gravel roads and what the road needs study claimed that's needed, it was pared down. because the road need study indicated that these gravel roads were deficient, but that was inclusive of ditching and width and drainage issues and brushing, not just the gravel. And because a road is what the road need study folks, what the engineers consider deficient in width, doesn't make it necessarily a bad road. Drainage improvements continue to happen year after year. So the focus right now is on the gravel. We also looked at some of the gravel roads that were short, less than, I think Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but we looked at gravel roads that were less than a half a kilometer in length and realized that you don't necessarily need gravel every 3 to 5 years on those roads because there's very little traffic. So if there's less than 50 cars a day, the amount of what I might call abuse on a gravel road is very limited. It's the roads that are heavily traveled that with gravel that need gravel more often. So the road need study was somewhat tempered through the asset management plan to say focus on the roads that are heavily traveled, that have more traffic, that have more density, and focus on the actual gravel application, and then continue with other components of your budget on recognizing that ditching and drainage is important. So hopefully that answers your question, but I'm happy for Dave to jump in because he was a major part of that component of the asset management planning with regards to the road need study.
Yes, thank you very much. That's exactly what happened. We did focus in on what our true needs are to match our service levels, our desired service levels. So some of these roads that have very low traffic, we have many dead-end roads that they're not a through road. We don't have the volume to, much like other municipalities would. So some of these wouldn't need the amount as often, the amount of resources as often to meet that service level. So once we established which roads really did, so we did break it out in different categories to help focus in and create more value in our asset management plan. And I hope that it's more meaningful when we read it, and it helps us give us a path to close that gap when we talked about so we will get to achieve what we want to achieve. We just had to define it in our terms, maybe a little better. And that's what we worked on. I hope that helps.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I just have 2 other quick questions on gravel, then I get off it. Just a comment, I had a couple of calls from people on Shawanega Lake Road, and I know that's a summer maintenance road. They were complaining that last year there were a lot of potholes on the road, and they were asking for more gravel. And we used to get a representation at council from Mr. Chaput in years gone by, but he's since, I think, left Shawanega Lake Road. And but anyway, so I just make that comment that if we could make sure that we give attention to all our roads, but maybe, take a look at Shawanega Lake Road. I told him I would bring it up at this meeting. So, and then my last question is this Nord grant for 120,000. Is this new? And if so, can someone explain it? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. If I may respond to Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I do have a note for Shawanega. We did spend a bit of time out there last year. Our grader does have we did pull a bunch of boulders out of there so our grader could get by, but we do need a bit of gravel out there for it to work with. There's quite a bit of let's say Canada bedrock, so the grader can't exactly smooth that out. We did also notice, I saw a lot of construction going on. I guess with the value of waterfront going up, I did see a lot of development seems to be happening out there. So we will give it more attention. We did some training last year for operators on our level 1 grader grader training. And this year we plan to do the same level 2 grader training. So we're trying to work to get our operators, 2 operators, to a higher level of experience and skills. So they're doing quite well, and we should have that grader working more often available to us. So we will we will definitely get out to Shawanaga, and you're welcome to give them my number. And then to the other question.
The Nord grant.
The
yes,
Nord grant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The Nords, that grant is new, and it's put in place for resource development. It's explained to me. So things such as forestry, mining, anything of that nature that they're looking to help with. We have approximately 80% or thereabouts of Crown lands. So we do see our fair share of resources being developed, timber especially. So we certainly fit the criteria when we apply for our roads, for gravel, to help with forestry. So it's a very nice grant that we seem to fit quite nicely. It is new. And we plan to use it for our roads. And they also talked about accepting our consulting fees for a pit development, as it would be a resource development for our roads, for forestry and such things.
Okay, thank you. At the risk of prolonging this just one more second, I want to just go back and comment on the roads need study, because I think that may have quite, caused some unnecessary, consternation on some people's part. When you ask professional engineers who do roads to do an evaluation of roads, they tend to apply a set of fairly common standards that are reflective of what the MTO or a large municipality might use if they were building a road from scratch. And I would say that we took with a very large grain of salt the deficiency on the gravel roads that was noted there. I mean, this is all a function of what kind of how much like an urban street do you want the road to look like, and what is the traffic, as David mentioned, what is the traffic load that's coming on? And there are some cases, Shawanaga Lake Road is a good example of it. It started out as I wouldn't be surprised if it started out kind of as a forest road, and there were a very small number of people that were using it. And so, they kind of accepted the quality of it. But as that road has been extended further and further along the shore of the lake, the traffic goes up, and now it's, the road has to be built to a higher standard to withstand that kind of traffic. And the biggest part of the problem usually is actually the road base, not the gravel that you put on it. So if you have a road with a poor road base, not properly ditched, not properly drained, not culverts where they need to be, not, in some cases, rock has to be blasted out and so on. If you don't do that, then you can pour gravel on it till the cows come home, and you're not going to have a good road, because the spring is going to heave it to pieces, and the frost will heave it and you're going to lose a lot of your gravel off in the ditches and so on. So, these are things that all have to be taken into consideration. But as far as gravel is concerned, I'm satisfied that we do have enough gravel in our budget, and we will have to continue on a go forward basis to do more ditching and more correction of issues related to the road base on some of the more heavily traveled roads. But there are a lot of the roads that we have, and believe me, we do have a lot of them, and a lot of those are they'll be subject to occasional maintenance and bits of gravel here and there, but they're not, it's not like we have to pour 50% of our municipal budget into roads. Otherwise, they're going to deteriorate. They're actually, if you look at it from a historical perspective, they're actually in most of the gravel roads are not in bad condition compared to the past and relative to the traffic volumes that are on them. So I don't feel like we're shortchanging this one. Anyway, just a bit of perspective on the engineering that goes into this. So is there anything else about this particular item of gravel and roads, or can we move on to something else?
Mr. Mayor, it's Scott Nash. I have one really quick question, if I could be so kind as to ask it. Won't take more than 20 seconds, I don't think.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Scott.
And, perfect. And I'm not sure if it's a question to yourself, Mr. Mayor, or to Mr. Creaser. And just when I was reading the report, that needs report, or the outline that David Creaser did for the next 5 years, I was just wondering if Clear Lake Road at the back end of Ardbeg, I didn't see it on the report, and I didn't know if that might be a ministry road and not a municipal road. So that's one of my questions. I just didn't see it on the 5-year plan there for any gravel to be applied onto that road, Clear Lake Road. And the second one was just for the gravel pit, if you got an A license, do you have approximate cost of what it would cost per ton to crush the gravel yourselves? And the second part to that is, I think in the budget, there's a 20% increase this year for material. Is that material or is that trucking because of the fuel surcharges? So there's kind of just three things there. The Clear Lake Road, is it in here somewhere and I just missed it? The cost per ton when you're going to grind yourself in the future, and the 20% increase. I think it said estimated. I'm assuming there's some tenders that are coming in. Thank you for allowing me to ask those questions.
Hey, David, do you want to? The Clear Lake Road is our road, but I don't.
Yes,
Well,
thank
go
you very
ahead.
much. Clear Lake Road is our road. You are correct. Clear Lake Road in the next 5 years is not on here. Not all roads are on here in the 5 years. So Clear Lake would be down the list, such as many other roads are not on this list as well.
Does that
So-
mean it won't get any? Sorry to interrupt, David, but does that mean it won't get any gravel?
So it won't get the overlay, like in this maintenance plan that we have, this is a maintenance plan. Typically, you're going to see upwards of 4 inches or 100 mils of gravel in places where we can, and some corrections for frost heaves as we can too. But there is an allowance, which we do haul gravel with our own trucks for maintenance every year, annual maintenance gravel, the smaller portion. That portion would, you may see some gravel out there from that. But front to back, the whole thing done, it will not happen with 4 inches of gravel in this 5 years. That road is a long, very long haul away from our pits. It's very expensive and currently does not have the traffic. So any gravel right now would be hauled with our own tandem trucks. We hauled out there. It does need drainage. It does need gravel. It does need attention. We will continue to give it attention, but it won't get a full capital improvement in this next 5 years. The cost for crushing is a bit of a we'll have to see how the fuel affects it. But in the past, I've done crushing and blasting. And blasting, when you blast rock, it's blasted in place. It bulks at 30%. So if you measure your in-place costs, you're probably $7 a cubic meter, which is going to give you 2.2 cubic meter or 2.2 tons. So you're down to $3.5, but $4 a ton for blasting, maybe $3.54 this year. And then crushing, you probably about, it depends. If you get the 100,000, you're probably six. So you're probably over 10. You're probably close to 10. It depends. We could, like, if we do the 100,000, we may get better prices. We might shoot around the $9 mark. That would likely be where we're at if we do 100,000.
Okay, thanks. I guess did that answer the question? What,
Yeah, no, I think it did. Thank you very much. I was just curious on the cost of the grinding, and I think the last one was just on the 20% increase was budgeted, not volume wise, but I think it's for the cost of the material was 20%. And is that just based on what you forecast the tenders to come in at? That was all. And again, thank you for letting me ask the questions. Much appreciated.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
yeah, go ahead.
So I understand there to be a 20% cost for the material cost. I would expect the trucking cost to go up 20%-ish. I would think as well, maybe even more, but the fuels plays the biggest role in that. So if the crushing was done last year, you may not see any more than the 20% go up, but the delivery cost definitely will increase. But I'm told 20% is what we should expect for this year over last year overall.
Okay, thank you. How about a different topic? Sorry, we've got a while on this one. Is there something else that counselors that you'd like to talk about? I see
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
McEwen has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, this would be, I guess, to our treasurer. When I look at the changes since our February 22nd meeting, and the last paragraph under that analysis there, going from page 2 to page 3, it shows a shortfall of $78,000. I'm just wondering how I can relate that to when I look at the revenues. Revenues were in a favorable situation of 11.02% of the budget over 2021. And then the expenses were 5.24% over the 2022 budget as unfavorable. I'm just trying to rationalize on the whole budget. When you have 11% favorable and 5 point something unfavorable, and then going back to saying that we have a shortfall of 78,000. It's just something I don't understand between the next of those numbers. I wonder if she can explain that a little bit.
Sure, through
Go
you,
ahead.
Mr. Mayor. The best page for you to look at would be page 20. If you want to go to page 20. And that page actually has a summary of basically all of our various budgets, if you want to call it that. We have operating expenses, we have capital expenses, we have reserves, and then we have the revenues. So what page 20 does is it summarizes the proposed budget for 2022, and you can also see the budget as it was approved in 2021. And that is in the very bottom right-hand corner of all those numbers, you will see the $78,000 shortfall. So it's, you know, the various increases in the revenues and expenses, et cetera. Also, there are reserves as well. The increase, you can see there's a substantial increase in the funding going into the reserves from 155,000 in 2021 up to 330,000 in 2022 proposed. So it's really more about how the numbers, because they are different volumes, different sizes, expenses, revenues, et cetera. It's how they all wash out together and come to that that overall shortfall. For example, if you look under 2021, you'll see all of it washes down to the 161,505 that was approved by council to come out of the surplus for 2021. And you can see the actuals as of March 14th, and I admit I've changed those numbers a little bit since then too. It's showing that we will likely be in a surplus. That 75,000 means that we will likely be in a surplus. And then moving into the 2022, you can see the numbers all flow down. It's not so much the increases into the individual expense or revenues, it's how do they all work against each other.
Okay, so the total reserves, that's bring the two factors together big time then between expense and revenue then, isn't it? Like,
yeah, I mean, that was
okay.
the biggest piece of that increase, of course, was the 175,000 coming as a result of the capital asset proposal to start increasing and ramping up those contributions into reserves in order to fund the capital on a go-forward basis.
So if we're looking at a certain percentage increase on the budget, or increase on the budget, I guess that would possibly be offset by some of the surplus. And even with the 330 in there, though, we're still looking at some increase on our budget, I would assume.
I'm not sure what you mean by an increase on the budget.
Seemed to me, maybe it was the last report back in February, you were talking about a 3.5% or something.
That's correct. And that is actually built into the revenues right now.
Okay, so I guess that was my question.
Yes, it is in
Okay.
the revenue line. You will see there is the 2021 approved budget was 6,037,000. This year it's 6,702,000. The 3.5% tax increase is built in there. That's equivalent roughly to about $100,000, a 3.5% increase, a little over $100,000. But you know, when you have capital, we have capital funding in the revenues as well, and that tends to go up and down quite a bit because debt financing is considered to be a revenue. So it goes up and down depending on what the needs are on the capital side. So it's not always easy to compare the two together.
Okay. Alrighty. Thanks on that one.
Okay, thanks. I thought I saw Councillor Woods trying to get in. Am I right? Or
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thanks.
go ahead.
I just had one quick question. Under the significant changes, I noticed that the Swords Road boat launch monies have been removed from the budget. I was just wondering where the talks are, or where that stands. What's the plan moving forward with Swords Road, and is there a plan to try and find some accommodation for those folks that are water access for the upcoming season?
I don't know, Madam CAO, do you want to take that one, or?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can give counselors an update. So firstly, what we can tell you is that the folks at the Lorimer Lake Lodge have committed to providing boat launch and access for 2022. And the people that had been speaking to council are comfortable with that. They realized that they wanted some assurances for this year, and they have them. So beyond that, we are working with both of the delegations that came to council. We've met with them, talked about some of the options. We've reached out to both McKellar and McDougall to talk about their interest in joining us for a shared solution. McKellar seems to be working on an option that will just work for their few residents. McDougall is open to suggestions, and that's something that David Creaser and the public works manager, who's also the CAO at McDougall, are going to do some reconnaissance work in the spring and look at some of the areas where there's a possibility for a boat launch. So there's still a number of options that we need to look at, and that will be appropriate for the needs of the Lorimer Lake water access folks. But like I said, they're very comfortable for 2022. They were in no rush for a solution at this point, but certainly over the next 6 to 8 months, we'll be looking at solutions, and that will be part of the 2023 budget. So hopefully that answers your questions. It hasn't been forgotten. We've been working in the background, looking at options and pricing things out and trying to work with the people that have an interest in this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw Councillor Gorham Matthews with a hand, a figure, a virtual hand up. Go ahead.
I did, yeah, but Councillor Woods beat me to it. My question was about Lorimer Lake as well. I was just wanting to make sure that the people that needed the water access had it for this year. And that's good to hear that they're taken care of for this year, and we have the summer to work out a solution that hopefully works well for ourselves and McDougall. So that was my question.
Okay, well, thanks for that question. I do want everybody to know that we have, and both the CAO and I have taken very seriously the concern that folks on Lorimer Lake had, and we did meet with them and virtually and talk to them about various things and looked at suggestions that they had, and a couple of things became apparent fairly quickly. First, that the proposal that was presented to council earlier in a delegation of trying to create a public landing at Swords Road would probably not have addressed, because of space limitations, would not have addressed the actual requirement that exists there in terms of the number of people who would be relying on that landing to get, potentially relying on that landing to get to their water access properties. Never mind, members of the general public who might want to come in for a day's fishing or whatever. And we did also have conversations with Mr. Werwa about his plans, and so it became apparent that we needed to look a little more broadly for solutions. And it also became apparent that there were other folks on, if you like, the McDougall part of Lorimer Lake who also have similar issues and concerns. And so that led us to approach, as Michelle mentioned, approach the other municipalities and see if there was, it's possible to work together and so on. I guess the only, and so the matter hasn't been resolved or anything, but it's not going to be a problem. We're satisfied that it's not going to be a problem for those ratepayers in this coming season, 2022 season. And maybe not going forward either, but I would say our intention is to stay on top of it and make sure that there is work done on a good long-term solution. And I suppose this is a good opportunity to sort of just segue into another subject, which is the whole question of our public landings. And as you know, this has come up a few times in the past. We have quite a large number of them, and some of them are on, I would say a majority of them are in fact on Crown land. Some of them we have land use permits for, some of them we don't. Council, back when in one of our recent discussions, I noted that council expressed support for looking at these, at the requirements of them and seeing what, I mean, typically what we've done in the past is we've responded to various groups who have come to us and said, well, why don't you do this at such and such a location? But I think the in many cases, there's some investigation required. There may be some negotiation with M&R and various other things. And I believe the approach that we need to take with these is to have our staff research the various options, make sure that we understand what the needs are that people have, figure out what the best solutions are, and then incorporate into our budgets things that we can afford to do and that are equitable, as equitable as they can be to the various areas of the municipality. It's kind of like roads, you know, it's not a different thing. You know, everybody wants something done with their road, but their particular road that they use, and everybody wants something done with their particular landing that they use. But we probably should have a sort of a standard approach that we use, which involves getting the information together, making sure that we know what the needs are, and develop a plan for when these would get addressed, subject to the availability of resources. So that's certainly what I would be encouraging us to do. And I would point out that it's consistent with with asset management, the principles of asset management planning, which is, you know, try to get into a more trying to move from a kind of an ad hoc approach to issues as they arise and demands or requests as they come up, and move towards a more kind of disciplined approach to figuring out what actually needs to be done and where and what the priorities are. So anyway, just a general comment about that. It's that taking the item out of the budget in the case of Lorimer Lake wasn't an attempt to say to anybody, oh no, we don't care about your problem anymore, or we're not, or even suggesting that it's been solved, but just allowing for the time necessary to figure out what the best approach is and what the best plan is to deal with it. So maybe there's another item you'd like to talk about that's in the budget.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, I agree, by the way, with what you're saying about our landings, and we obviously need to study them and come up with a strategy with respect to them. So anyway, I want to make a comment that I think staff did a pretty good job, by the way, of taking the comments from the last budget meeting and incorporating, you know, studying them and incorporating them in this proposed iteration of the budget. So I want to thank you for that. So I have a series of other questions. Hopefully, if others want to pop in and relieve me, but I'm going to get through these questions before the meeting's done. So quickly, I'll go through page 4, where it says potential sources of funding. The very last dot point says funding TBD. I guess that means to be determined, $40,579. Bart, could you explain that, what that means?
Yes, I can explain that. If you, the funding that we're talking about right there has to do with the capital and special projects budget alone. So if you look on page 23 of the capital budget, that's part of the capital budget, the capital and special projects budget, you will see under the column TBD, $40,579. That is a portion of the 70,000, whatever that number was,
Okay.
that we still have to resolve. So
Okay.
it's part of that.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize that. That's good. Page 5. Let me get to, I'm trying to go go through it on my computer here because I don't have a hard copy. So page 5, let me bring it up here. Sorry.
Page 5. Okay.
Page 4. Oh, maybe it's wrong.
In you're talking page 5 of 32, because sometimes you'll see a page that has that has another number. Yeah.
I think it's 5 of 32. Sorry. Yeah. And I'm trying to, okay, so I've got, there's an item in there that says, maybe I've got it on the wrong page here, but there's an item that says proposed roads and municipal office, 26,652. So I guess that's under proposed. It says 1,800, 3 months interest. Then it says annual debenture, 26,652. So why is that out like that? Why does it say roads and municipal facility debenture? And my question is, what will the debenture be for the municipal facility debenture, and what does roads mean? Like what's in there? So can you explain the breakdown of the $26,652, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I've done here is I've really just consolidated for budget purposes. What that is that will be the carrying cost of construction loan in 2022 for both the roads and the municipal facility debenture. The first year during which, when you're in construction, you don't take out the debenture until you've completed it. So as soon as you do a draw on your construction loan, there's a small amount of interest. So over the course of the year, what we try to do is we try to maintain the bank balance at a certain level. And when we start to go below that, then we move to drawing on one of the potential constructions loans, which will then translate into a debenture. So the annual, and they're just consolidated here in order to, for the sake of simplicity, really more than anything. They are detailed, I believe, in more detail in the operating budget. But that's really what that is. The backhoe loan obviously is going to be through the bank, so that one is treated separately. The cost of that we estimate would be $40,000 a year. The roads and municipal facility debenture, the one is $165,000 for this building, the renovations, and the roads are only going to need about $78,000, if I recall. And I can go through the budget, but about $78,000 in debenture financing for 2022. So that's just to give you a sort of a consolidated number at this point, so you can see what it looks like. It's actually detailed in more detail, and I can find it fairly quickly in the budget on page 13. And you will see the line items there. Again, it's just there to show you what we estimate the cost of that construction loan will be for this year. It'll be very short term. At the end of the year, we expect to be able to be drawing on that. Then once we complete the projects, we'll move them into debentures in the following year.
Okay, do you know what the length of the debenture will be for the municipal office?
Well, we haven't brought it to council yet. I'm expecting it'll be somewhere between 5 and 10 years. I think I estimated it at 10 years for the purposes of this. Generally, what I saw on your debentures for the last few years, most of them have been in the 10-year range for roads, etc. And so I think I just did an estimate based on 10 years for both.
Okay, thank you. My next two questions are on the capital budget and general government. I think they are. Mr. Mayor, I wonder if you could explain, we talked a little bit about the 40,000 for communication equipment, et cetera, in the community center, or equipment, new equipment. I think there was a screen and some other stuff. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that, to exactly what that is. And how, if that will allow us to eventually go back into the community center live and be able to have people on Zoom or whatever. And my second thing in there is the scanner printer for $25,000 for building drawings. I wonder if Michelle, you could perhaps tell us a little bit about that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll take the first one as best I can. I guess the short answer is this: if we were, for example, to decide, today, or not, it's not on the agenda today, but I mean, if we were to decide right away to resume face-to-face meetings in the community center, what we would essentially have is we would have a requirement. Well, the people would essentially have to show up for those meetings in order to participate fully. And by that, I mean, they would have to be present in the room to to see and be seen. They could conceivably hear, of course, and I mean, we do have, our audio facilities are much improved from the past. You really haven't seen them in operation, but they're pretty good. So I mean, we can still record the proceedings and put them up on the website, and it's possible for someone to come in and participate audio only, but the problem is it's very difficult to we can't integrate the video, so it's very difficult to see exactly you can't see who's speaking, and they can't see what's going on in the community center. So in order, the money, and I realize it seems like a fair bit of money, but the things that are missing, the main pieces that are missing, are a good large screen that can be used to display what is coming in from outside, or to display, for that matter, a movie or a video or something that you want to show to people in the room, and a permanently mounted data projector that would drive it for content coming in over the internet. So for Zoom calls, then that you would be able to see, everybody would be able to see what's going on as well, whether you're in the room and the person who's presenting is not in the room, or vice versa. So that's what that is. That's intended to complete it, so that it would provide full functionality for hybrid meetings, meaning meetings that some people are present in the room and some people are coming in remotely, as they do now with Zoom. The other piece that I have to mention to you, of course, that is a key factor in this, is our internet access. And right now we do not have, there has been some progress made on resolving internet issues, and I don't want to go into it today because it's still kind of up in the air, but I mean, there's still some issues with it because of the fact that the municipal office is being renovated, but we still don't have good internet in the community center, and that's something else that has to be improved in order for this to work properly, these hybrid meetings I'm talking about. But I'm fairly confident that we will get there at some point this year, assuming council is willing to spend that particular $40,000, which is supposed to be everything else that needs to be done to get it fully operational. So my other question would be, oh, sorry, unless you have.
Yeah, just an observation that 40,000 seems seems high, but obviously I don't understand the complexity of it, I guess. But you know, a screen and a projector, and I know it's more than that. It's just 40,000 seems high, but I share your desire to go to a hybrid model and to do it effectively. Hopefully, we don't spend 40,000 and then still are in the position of having insufficient internet, so we can't go to a hybrid model. And we have $40,000 worth of equipment, I guess, that primarily would sit there until we do get the proper internet in terms of this. So, but okay, that explains it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we have some other ways of addressing the internet, I think, in the time frame in which this is all going to happen. So anyway, the other question had to do with the scanner, and I'll ask our CAO if she. I think Michelle, you're the one appropriate one to answer that.
I can answer that on behalf of our chief building official. This was a request from the chief building official and our planning assistant. We have in storage in our many filing cabinets here, lots of drawings for building permits and other drawings, construction drawings as well. And part of our records management process, which we're working on for property files, we want to work on for the building department files. And so the idea is that we can scan all these drawings, reduce the amount of paper that we actually have, because the scanned drawing will be our record. And in fact, work on our records management process, which has been a project that has been long discussed, and we're finally just getting to it this year. This scanner will be funded through the building department reserve, which is the surplus that we realized in 2021 due to the significant number of building permits.
That's good. Thank you. That's my final question. I noticed somewhere in here we had at one point last time an iteration that had the pool, and out in 2023, I think it was $250,000. And I know Councillor McEwen asked a question about should we be funding some of that this year, and I think the answer was no. But I notice it's completely gone now, so there's nothing in there. So I wonder if someone could please explain why that happened. Thank you.
Unmute you. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we had a 5-year capital plan that was part of the attachment for the capital on the first iteration on February 22nd. For this go around, we thought we would just focus on the funding of this year's projects and get to some conclusion on what's coming, what's staying in, if it's all staying in, and ultimately get to an overall budget. What we plan to do is come back in the next meetings to show you again that 5-year plan. But that's why you're not seeing it, because it's actually hidden on attachment, the back part of attachment A, which is pages 21 through to a couple of pages after that. You're just not seeing it there. It's still there, but it's just not displayed for you, so we could focus on the actual funding at this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Some other questions or comments? Councillor McEwen. You're muted, Councillor McEwen.
Is that better? Sorry.
That's better. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Barb can give us a little bit of a quick overview of where we're at with our 2022 draft reserve budget. I'm looking at page 27. I'm just wondering how the Parkland dollars and different things fit into it. And I see we're dropping back, as we're aware, by taking the 330 and transferring it in. She just give us a quick capsulation of where we're at with our reserves. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The reserves for 2022 are looking a little bit different. We have quite a bit more money going into the reserves, predominantly because of the $175,000 that was coming out of the capital asset plan. But at the same time, we also are seeing a fair amount of money coming back out of the reserves. In part, that was actually the plan in the asset management plan. That was why they recommended increasing the amount of money that you're putting into the reserves. That's the investment piece, and then you draw more money out, because that's really where you need to turn more and more to for your capital assets. That being said, we are taking a draw this year on the Parkland Reserve. If you if you look on the capital plan itself, you'll see that the land purchase that we are making is the major piece of that Parkland draw, and rightly so, because it is land and it is related to a park. There were a couple of other recreational types of projects in the 2022 budget that we were drawing from the Parkland Reserve as well. The others are pretty self-explanatory, where it's a piece of equipment that we're funding. We're taking out of the roads equipment reserve. Most of the capital projects that are in the administration area are draws on the general reserve, which is a reserve that is more for general types of purposes. So we're coming down a little bit in the reserves. We're going from 1.2 at the end of 2021 to $1 million at the end of 2022. We're still floating around that $1 million mark, which is basically what keeps your bank account flowing. So I'm not sure if that helps you or.
Yeah, yes, it does, Barb. And I guess the first item under general reserve there, I was curious to know if that in fact was the purchase money, or to cover the purchase of a property. So that's coming from Parkland.
Right.
So that's good, because I think that's an intention of that Parkland money. So
It is, yes.
okay, so floating around the $1 million mark, plus or minus a couple 100,000, I guess, or 100,000 is where we want to be in your mind, eh?
I would always say we want to be higher, because that's what I'm supposed to say.
Yeah.
But it takes time to plan and to gradually increase the contributions that you're making from your operating budget, bearing in mind that 30,000 is a 1% increase. So it's, you're going to want to gradually increase those reserves. The one thing that we probably would like to bring back to you, there's two things actually. One is that when there is a surplus, that you start thinking about automatically applying that surplus to a general reserve, so that it's just a cleaner process when it comes to budget time. You're not waiting to see what the annual surplus is, that you move it right away into one of the general reserves. And the other piece too is you have a lot of little reserves that you're not funding, that are really sitting there, that have been sitting there for some time. It probably would make a lot of sense within the next little while to do a consolidation of your reserves, so that you can give a careful thought about what reserves do you want, what types of things are you going to fund from reserves, and consolidate in some of these little 25,000, 60,000 bits and pieces that really haven't done anything for years. Then you have a better sense of where you're going with your reserves and what you want to fund from those reserves.
Okay, that's great, Barb. Thank you. I've always felt that reserves are a real big factor, play a big part in running our operations. So appreciate the work you've done on it, and appreciate the work you've done on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Barb has provided me with a quick segue into something that might be worth just mentioning to everybody. It's not an action item for the moment, but you'll notice that one of those little reserves that she was talking about has a heading that says Cache Dam on it. And Cache is a it's the dam at the outflow of Cashagaba Lake, which where Bulger and Cashagaba drain into, well, down into White's Lake and then ultimately into the Magnetawan River. But there's actually a dam there, and some of you will recall it was the subject of a environmental assessment conducted by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to look at replacing the dam. And once again, the suggestion was that if they were willing to rebuild the dam, they wanted the municipality to take over ownership of it, as we did some years ago with the Washkish Dam. So we actually have two dams that we're responsible. Well, we have. We're not really responsible for the Cache Dam because the MNR is still their responsibility. Actually, we have a third dam. There's the dam between Gooseneck and Washkish that is a rock crib dam that also at some point in time might need some attention. But so anyway, just to let you know that where that is at. The environmental assessment was completed, and a new dam for the Cashagaba Dam was a concrete dam with a very long expected lifetime was designed by consultants, and they did provide us with some reports, but there were still some questions about that I had. The intention was to make a presentation to council, hopefully sooner rather than later, with all the findings of this and with some recommendations and so on. And by the way, it's not intended that we would be spending money on this, but we would be asked, as I indicated, to make some sort of a commitment to look after this dam going forward if they rebuild it. And otherwise, I think they're not going to rebuild it. They're just going to leave it the way it is. So anyway, just to let you know that that's coming. I don't think we would need to spend any money, not even the $12,000 that's there in the short run. But if we do have when we do have ongoing responsibility for a dam, like we do with the Washkish Dam, there is actually a need for a reserve. So probably one of the recommendations that you'll be getting is that we have a dam for a reserve for a dam reserve. How about that? So that we can have enough money to periodically have them inspected properly and that kind of thing, to make sure that we're not that our assets, like any other asset, make sure that the asset's not deteriorating in some unknown way. And so anyway, that's an example of that's just one that struck me on the page, so I thought I would mention it to you. Anyway, you will hear more about that in due course when we finish getting all the information together from the study that the MNR commissioned. So some other item that you'd like to talk about that's in the budget while we're still in committee of the whole. Councillor Gorham Matthews.
So I guess my question is, we know that we have this $78,000 that we have this shortfall for. I'm wondering, what are our options? Are we talking about, right now we're looking at a 0.5% tax increase. Are we talking about more of a tax increase? Or are we looking at ways of borrowing money for some of these items? I'm just wondering where we go from here. Do we take something off the capital list? What's our next step?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
We currently have a 3.5% tax increase built into the budget. So again, each 1% is going to generate about $30,000. The rate of inflation, as we all know, is, I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked at it in the last month or so, but it's over 5%. So at 3.5, we're below the rate of inflation. That's an option. You could increase the taxes to cover off on some of what's here. The option also exists to take additional dollars out of reserves. We would probably have to look at some of the, as I've described, some reserves that we don't really use. We could probably take some dollars out of those reserves as well. That's going to reduce your $1 million floater for your reserves down a little bit. 45,000 of it was coming from the capital budget itself. So then the option is always to remove some of those projects. If you look on page 21 through to 23, you'll see that the projects that currently don't have a reserve fund that I can go to fund them intuitively in any event. The digital radar sign is one. We have 20,000 for the electronic notice sign, but that one is a carryover, and it was intended to be funded through the surplus in any event in 2021. So again, we will have surplus money left over and that is already underway. That one I would recommend that leave it as being funded from surplus at this point. And then we have a small amount that is still unfunded technically for the nursing station, about $15,600. And that again could, we could pull it out of one of the remaining reserves, or we could do surplus funding. It's at 15,000. It's not worth trying to get into any debenture financing for that. It really wouldn't be worth it. So that's kind of where it is right now. I can't give you a firm surplus number at this point. I'm confident there will be a surplus. I'm confident that we can cover the $78,000. We will, if we don't know by the next meeting what that surplus number is in actual fact, then we could on a short-term basis fund it generally from the reserves and then replace them once the surplus number is defined, once the audit is complete. Everything's been submitted other than the general ledger to the auditors, but it generally takes them a couple of weeks to get to a final conclusion. So I hope that wasn't too long-winded an explanation of what we can do with that 78,000.
No, that makes sense. So what you're saying, if I'm hearing that correctly, is you're not too concerned about that 78,000. You think that in the long run that will all work out.
I think it will be. I mean, it's when the budget is approved, we will want a definite, this is how we're going to do it. It's not a huge amount of money. It's about a little over a 2% tax increase. It's, up to council whether they have an appetite for going beyond a 3.5% increase or not. But at the end, we should be able to resolve it.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you. Over the years, we have used surplus to fund any deficiencies. And I guess if I've learned anything, the deficiencies aren't just because of the operating budget. It can get, of course, very dangerous if you start using surpluses to fund your operating budget. But in this case, I think most of the surpluses come from capital projects. So I feel comfortable enough using the surplus against the 78,000. If you somehow went into the reserves and used that, when the surplus does come out, you're just going to apply it to reserve anyway. So I also feel comfortable that we've got, I think, most of the priorities that both staff and I think council, and most importantly, I think the ratepayers want. And I think I feel comfortable with a 3.5% tax increase. So at this point, I would fully support using the surplus, and it's generally it's over $78,000 in the past, but I guess we'll see this year. But so I would say that at least at this point, we target the surplus to go in and not start cutting programs or capital projects and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I just noticed for the first time that one of these unfunded items was the digital radar sign. I assume everybody understands what we're talking about. It's one of these signs that records how fast you're going. Doesn't issue tickets or anything, but it displays on the sign that as you enter Dunchurch, when you're supposed to be going at a speed of 50 kilometers per hour, you're actually going 78 kilometers per hour or whatever. And when we've had in the past complaints about people speeding through Dunchurch, which is mostly what the complaints are about, the OPP has said to us, well, it would be helpful if you actually had one of those signs so that we had an idea, the OPP had an idea of when it was that people were doing this speeding, so that they could sort of target their enforcement, as opposed to just trying to post a car with ordinary radar there to enforce, which they can't do very often. So in any case, what the suggestion that was made at the time was that we tried to coordinate with McKellar, because McKellar already has a couple of these signs, which they are in the process, and there's a permitting process with MTO and so on. You can't just buy them and stick them out wherever you want. You have to go through a process to get a permission to place them in certain locations. But apparently that's their intention this year, and the thought was that perhaps we could share their signs somehow or other and use them, because normally they don't leave them out. They don't put them in a permanent location and just leave them there. They move them around, and they're there mostly to get an idea of where infractions are taking place, so that can inform enforcement, as opposed to just having it there at a permanent fixture. They also have a deterrent value, by the way. People approach them, they realize that they're going too fast and they slow down. So, but I didn't know if we were talking about buying I didn't realize that we were proposing to buy our own as opposed to, unless I don't know if you have any comments about this, Dave, because I know you were looking into it. Is there?
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment.
Okay, Councillor McEwen is trying to get in here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I brought this up a couple of times also in passing without making any sort of recommendation on it. I've talked to McKellar and I've talked to Perry Sound and also to Sigmund people and the OPP, of course, because I bring this up at meetings regularly. The concerns people have on side roads with speeding. Biggest advantage, one of the big advantages to this sign is the data collection part of it. So it records all the vehicles going by and the speed they're going by at. So they can look at it and plus the time of day or week, day of the week. There's lots of data collected with that. So they can address individual locations based on these signs. The comments I get about sharing them, there's pluses and minuses. I guess the only plus is it could be a bit of a cost saving. The minus is that we don't have it when we probably need it. And the signs are portable. They can come as portable. They can be moved around from location to location. So I think there are some advantages to purchasing our own. We had a couple of them. And price I had from, I believe it was Sigmund, was $5,000 per unit. So they're not extremely expensive. and they may provide a significant advantage to us in informing people where they're at with their speeds on the road, and maybe engage OPP in getting this far out from Prairie Sound. One of the questions I always ask is, you know, what do we have to do, and what do you need to get?
Sorry, you're muted, Councillor McEwen.
Mr. Mayor, after all that, my God.
No, no,
Sorry.
we heard most of what you said. It was just the last
if-
few seconds. You must have hit the button or something.
Oh, no, it just muted me off, I guess. Sorry. So anyway, there are some advantages, I think, to having our own units, and they're about $5,000 per, as a quote I got verbally from one of the councillors in Seguin. So I don't see that as being an extremely high price for a sign or a couple of the radar signs. So I'd certainly support further investigation and or including them in the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, yeah, I don't think this is it's not a significant item. I just kind of noticed it was there for the first time. But anyway, unless you have if you have a report for us, Dave, that you wanted to, anything to report to us, fine. If not, we can wait till wait
Money
until
well
we do.
spent.
Okay. So what else would you like to raise in the budget? Any other items that you want to talk about before we go out of committee of the whole? While you're thinking about that, I will just mention to you that in her summary, Barb noted the fact that there had been essentially two adjustments with respect to the road grant protocol. There had been two adjustments. One of them was to change what we call X and Y, which are the factors that X is the number of kilometers of the private road that are covered, and Y is the number of people using it, or vice versa. Maybe I've got it backwards, Barb, I don't know, but in any case, to change both of those factors. And what we've had in the past, well, what happened in the past was that there was discussion in past years. There's been discussion about changing the budget, and it was unclear to some of us whether we were changing X and Y or changing just the amount available in the budget to be spent, which candidly doesn't pose an upper bound, so that, you know, whatever's in the budget, if more people apply, they still get their road grant. You know, it's such, more people apply such that it exceeds the budget, they still get it anyway. But it wasn't clear what we were increasing, and so there is a table, and councillors, you should have received it. It didn't come out with the package, but you should have received it this afternoon, which shows, going back for the life of the program since 2011, how the two factors that determine how much money one gets as a grant have increased over the years. And, you know, they've gone up by different amounts in different years, some years not by anything, but the budget has gone up, I think, most years, but in some years the factors didn't increase at all. But you can see that anyway from that table. I trust everybody's had a chance to look at it. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that when we come back out of committee of the whole, we agreed a few years ago that we would actually pass a resolution that says this is what X and Y will be, so that there isn't any confusion, so that our staff our treasurer has proper direction as to use to determine how much people get when they apply. based on the length of their road and the number of people that use it. So I just thought I'd draw that to your attention, make sure that you've had a chance to look at that. And if you haven't, and you want, we could always defer the actual approval of those numbers until another year. But right now, what is in the budget is X and Y each going up approximately 3.5%, and the total budget going up approximately, I think it's 3.5%. Okay, correct me, Barb, if there's anything I said that's wrong. Please.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, we did increase the X and Y factor by 3.5%, and then we also just added a little bit onto the budget to allow for additional participation. If you look at 2021, you'll see the budget was 83,749 and the actual was 83,730. So we had almost at budget participation. So again, we increased the X and Y, which is reflected in the budget, and then it just added a small amount additional for extra participation. So I think the overall budget increase is a little over 4%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
All right.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I think everyone realizes the importance of this program, so I'm fully supportive of this. I guess my question is, when I look at it, Y factor is per household. So on a road, if there's vacant lots, then there's not an allocation for those vacant lots. Is that correct? So it's just the people that are either season or just people who have a building and are either living there full-time or seasonally. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yes, the people that are actually using it's a per household, that it's called per household. So there is expectation that there is a residence, cottage, something there that is causing the use of the road.
And I guess the theory is that if it's vacant land, that they're not using the road and therefore wouldn't be eligible. I'm not suggesting we change it. I just noted as I got it in the motions. So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I comment?
Sure, go ahead.
I questioned our previous treasurer on that very item, and supposedly the person owning the property, vacant or built on, still qualify as one location. I think we should have that verified. I thought it made sense at the time, because people who own roads grant permission through the roads, even though they don't have buildings and such on it, but they qualify for one person at least owning each side of the road and maybe the road itself. So if you're a landowner on the road, my understanding was that you were a qualified one person applicant.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
So-
we'll come back with an answer on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Therefore, I don't think we should, I don't think we can pass this, can we?
No, I think if there's a question about it, that's kind of why I wanted to draw it to your attention, to make sure that, I just want to make sure everybody has the same understanding of what's going on here. And if there's some question, then we can defer it. It's not gonna, I'm not suggesting we change anything as far as the budget's concerned, just we get clarification for
Okay.
the benefit of, so you all know what's going on. Okay, can I ask again, are there any other questions or comments? We will have one more kick at the can. And I guess, sorry, I'm just going to take a look at the motions here and see what. So I don't see that there's a motion. I'll ask our unless I'm missing it, I'll ask our CAO, were we hoping to set a date for the meeting when we would actually finalize the budget?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My assumption, similar to last year, is that we would come back to council with the answers to the questions from today. There weren't that many, but we will come back on April 5th. And the resolution on April 5th will recommend the specific tax increase and that we move to a public meeting. And if we come back on April 5th with that resolution, the public meeting will be May 3rd because of the notice period required for the passing of the budget. So that was our intent.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going to try and get it done before that, but anyway, I guess. if
Well, I
there's-
think, yeah, I think being able to answer maybe with a little bit more clarity in regard to the surplus was the intent for the meeting on April 5th.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just, again, if everybody understands where we're going, that's, if no one has an objection, I don't, that's fine. That's approximately when we, in my recollection, that's approximately when we end up resolving this most years. Okay, so as I said before, we'll have another kick at the can. So if there are no more questions, I'll just ask one more time. Are there any other things you'd like to highlight in today's meeting? If not, we will move ahead to accept a motion to convene, to go out of committee of the whole and reconvene into regular meeting. I'd like to move that.
I'll move, Councillor Woods.
Councillor Woods, thank you. Seconded by,
I'll second Council McEwen.
thank you, Councillor McEwen. Is anyone opposed to that motion? All right, it's carried and we are back in regular session at 4:03 p.m. So the matters arising I had was the one about the road grant funding, just setting X and Y. So for now, we will just leave that in abeyance until we get the information. I'm just making a note here, waiting. And then just sort of put a wrapper around what we've done. As is suggested that we have a motion that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone hereby receives report FIN 2022-05 for information purposes, which I think we've already done in effect. And that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone hereby receives the draft 2022 operating and capital / special project budget as presented and as amended in discussions at the February 22nd, 2022 special council meeting. And that the following adjustments be made to the draft 2022 operating and capital / special budgets. And I don't believe that we actually recommended any, did we?
No,
Madam CAO, would you agree with that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I don't recall there were any adjustments to recommended.
All right, just want to be clear, we didn't miss anything. So could I get a mover and seconder for that? Basically, we're just receiving and acknowledging our discussion today.
I'll make the motion, Councillor
Yeah.
Lamb.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb, seconded by,
I'll second, Councillor Woods.
thank you, Councillor Woods. Any discussion? Any opposed? All right, that's carried. And not sure we need this, but our confirmatory bylaw, could I get a mover and seconder, please?
I'll move, Councilor McEwen.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen, seconded by,
I'll second Counselor Lamb.
thank you, Councillor Lamb. Any opposition to that motion? And that takes us to adjournment, whereas the business of this meeting has concluded. Now therefore be it resolved that this meeting be adjourned at, and it looks like 4:06 PM until the regular council meeting of Tuesday, April 5th at 6:30 PM. Or until the call of the chair. Mover and seconder.
I'll move, Councillor Woods.
Councillor Woods moves, seconded by,
I'll second, Councilor McEwen.
thank you, Councillor McEwen. Okay, thank you. Can I assume that's carried? Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you again on April 5th.
Very good. Have a good day, folks.
Take care.